Okay, everybody, welcome to Ending the Stigma, a Path to Recovery. I'm Fred Carroll, and that is Scott H. Silverman. What's up, Scott?
Hey, Fred. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good. Nice to see you again,
Good
as
to be.
always.
Oh yeah. Well,
As always. How's
got it.
your How's your California weather?
Weather's pretty good. We had some big rain last week. We got some more rain coming, which is good because we do need a lot of water. It's chilly a little bit more. I expect a higher utility bill this month than I've had probably all year. But otherwise, look, compared to some of the weather going on in other parts of the country, the tornadoes and the loss of life from weather, I feel real grateful to be here in Southern California.
Yeah. Well, didn't you just have an earthquake yesterday? But up north?
Uh, it's possible. I didn't
Isn't that
read about.
right? That's how big. See, in Connecticut, when something happens in Connecticut, we know. I know something happened. Your California is so big that you can't even tell something happened up north. It's you're too spoiled. You're too spoiled.
Yeah. Well, between all the stuff that go the fires and this and that, and there could have been an earthquake up north, but and when you look at the news cycle, as far as where it is on the broadcast piece, because we watch generally national news, we don't watch much of local, but it's possible it happened. I mean, we have quite a few of them every month. On some of them subtle, some are, but if it was a big one, I would have heard about it.
Have you dealt with it before?
Earthquakes?
Yeah.
Oh, nothing major here with San Diego because we're not quite on that. We're at the end of the Andres fault, so we haven't really had major ones here like Los Angeles has and San Francisco the way they're built up. But nothing that's cut power off for more than a couple of hours if that's even happened. So it's not bad here. And I don't know if
Right.
it's our proximity to the ocean or just where we are on the planet, but San Diego's not really had any major issues with it.
Yeah. So, what do you want to talk about today? You got anything
Well,
specific? We were just talking off air. What do you want to talk about out of those things?
I just did an interview the other day and I spoke for like 25 minutes and the interviewer said, well, Chris is bringing us up. He gets all the news, hundreds of
Yeah.
miles from San Diego. Just we talked for like almost 30 minutes and we were talking about all the stuff that's kind of going on right now. And one of the things that's really stunning, the report that just came out that one of the biggest killers right now of males 18 to 45 is opioid overdosing in this country. So it is that was an interesting factoid. So we continue to see it. Obviously, the COVID, the new strain with Omicron, or it's called Omicron. It's scary, but I've had my shots, I've had my booster, and they say if you get it, it's going to be pretty mild. And what was the first person I think who died was in Kentucky, and they never got their vaccination, I believe, and they got COVID, so they thought their antibodies were strong, and that person got this new strain and it killed them. But they're part of the facts of the story is that they had underlying issues. So that kind of stuff's going on, and I think I shared with you my daughter's moving to New York, so it's a little sad and exciting at the same time. So, you know,
Well, how often do you see her anyway?
well, we'd see her probably about every 45 days, maybe less. She'd come down.
And you're
And
still, your
oh
wife's
yeah,
still gonna see her every 45 days.
yeah, we'll work something out. Probably she'll come back, in spring, maybe early summer, and we'll go back there once or twice a year. I'm not real fond of New York. I like the food, but I don't really care for the weather. But once this whole COVID thing slows down, I think we'll pop some trips and go
Well,
back.
speaking of that, does New York, because that's where your issue ended, does it bring back any bad mojo type stuff or any bad juju
Not
that
really,
way?
not really.
No.
Other than that's kind of where my drinking career ended, if you will. But other than that, no, it's not. I don't have trigger points like that. I walk around places and when we were walking around, see bars and noise, and I don't go to parties, things like that anymore. But I'm too old for that anyway.
Well,
So
speaking of that, would because I don't know these things, but if you weren't 30, what is it, 36 years, 38 years,
37 in November.
37 years sober, if somebody's a year, so if this was your first year,
Mhm.
Would New York be a trigger? Is it common for that for an addict to be
It-
triggered by location?
well, they say it takes a couple of years to kind of replace some of those behaviors, because it's holiday time, I've been doing a lot of media around staying clean and sober during the holiday time. And for some people that are in early recovery, it's always good to make a plan, prepare things. Everyone walks around now with a water bottle, so you can always go to a party with a water bottle and be drinking out of your straw, and no one's going to give you a hard time. And I think that people have, with what we're doing and talking about the stigma, there's a lot of concern out there because every family has been impacted in the last couple of years with all the issues around self-medication and addiction. And I think there's a heightened awareness today, but generally speaking, the first couple of years of your sobriety, it's recommended you avoid your old playmates, play places, and play things. So, would it be an issue? I didn't go back to New York for a while. And a lot of it was because when I flew, I drank a lot before I flew. So that was where I did a lot of my drinking when I was traveling, was before I got on the plane, while I was on the plane, and when I got off the plane. So that was always a great place to kind of sit in your little seat. And back in those days, the bar cart be rolling up and down the aisles. Different now. So, but no, it's not an issue for me. And, but I went to a meeting this morning. I was at a meeting yesterday. I'm doing everything I can, a little bit each day, to try to maintain my own recovery. And I've watched so many people that I know in my group who've relapsed, and it's been difficult for them because once you go out, coming back in is hard, and especially now because you can't get that connectivity with others that are in recovery. You can do it through Zoom, and some people are comfortable with it like I am, and other people aren't. So it's a tough time. So I tell people, look, if you don't feel safe, don't go there. And if you're going to be coming home for holidays and be with your family, make a plan. And as a family who has somebody in their family that may have an issue, be prepared and know that, that person's not going to have an easy time in that kind of environment.
So with these, we were talking about pros and cons of different solutions and stuff like that through addiction and stuff. And what do they typically do to somebody that comes out of recovery? Do they end up going back to the same neighborhood, the same home? Is it recommended that they move? Is it recommended? Are they better off? I could see a lot of pros and cons on both sides. You put them back in the home, they're around the same people, the same friends, their same dealer is still available. But if you move them, then they're alone and they're lonely. And what do you do when you're alone and lonely? You chase.
Well, like I just shared, it was recommended to me, and I suggested to others that you change your playmates and play places and play things, meaning that if your whole group, and generally at that level of consumption where your addiction has really just, blown up, so to speak, and if you're at home, and there are circumstances in your environment, you can go to sober livings, you can go to recovery homes, there's places you can go while you kind of build your transformational recovery path and work on the tools that you need to make better choices or different choices. And you do that when you feel safe. And for some people, it's 6 weeks, some people it's 6 months. They say it takes 5 years for a full emotional transformation. That's what the experts say, to really get the tools you need. So it really depends on different things, and as I think Chris just said, there are live meetings people can go to. They're not as prevalent as they used to be, but they're out there. But most people that are suffering, they're not looking for solutions. They're looking for ways to kind of keep that level of anesthesia moving forward. So they're not really of sound mind. Talked to a family today. They go, we have a 36-year-old. He's making all the wrong choices. We told him to get back to work. He can't seem to keep a job. Well, he's lost all those life skills, especially if he's been under the influence for a couple of years. So, it's got to be stopped. It's got to be assessed. You've got to have a recovery plan. And that's hard to do on your own, because if you knew how to do it, you probably wouldn't have gotten yourself where you're at. And if you are, in a place where you can't really control your consumption, stopping on your own is next to impossible.
Yeah, it's definitely, we were talking off air about all the pros and cons, how confusing it gets to, you take the drugs away and there's a pro and a con list. You give them the drugs, pro and con. You were talking about these safe places now. New York already has them. New York has 3 of them.
Right. Yes, the safety injection sites, or safe injection sites, I think they're calling them. So if you're an IV drug user and you're concerned about getting hepatitis or HIV or something from a needle, you can go into these safety injection sites and you can get clean needles, be in a sterile environment. And if you have dirty drugs on you, they will find a way to help you get something to help you feel better, whatever that's defined as. And it's interesting because I think San Francisco is doing it as well. And The studies aren't in yet, but I have mixed emotions. It's a form of harm reduction. Clearly, if it helps save a life and reduces overdoses, that makes sense. But at the end of the day, if it's also a form of enabling. And you and I talked about Europe and what's going on in other parts of the country. I mean, other parts of the world. And in our country, promoting access and getting access to treatment seems to be very difficult. Where in other countries, if you're willing to surrender your syringe, they will put you into treatment and it's paid for. So, and I think those are the countries that really seem to have a great outcome with people that are seeking, that harm reduction portal. Because when you sit them down and when they're, stabilized again, you can maybe introduce an idea of abstinence or medication assisted treatment or, harm reduction, but because you have a captive audience. But I don't think that's the big emphasis. The emphasis is try to keep people from dying. And to me, it's kind of like a homeless shelter. Why should somebody go to a homeless shelter and the food lines year after year after year, when you as a homeless provider should be able to provide some tools to encourage people? And a lot of people in the social service world simply say, well, we can't make people do something they don't want to do. And my attitude is, don't make them do it. Just give them the options and practice a little bit of tough love, just like you do with harm reduction, because tough love and introduction of options is another form of harm reduction, in my opinion, as well, and creating options for people who are suffering.
So earlier when you were talking, you mentioned that the death rate was for males. What was it? The ages?
18 to 45-year-old overdosing on opioids right now is the number one killer of 18 to 45-year-olds. So I can't remember who wrote the study, but I'm sure it was blessed by the CDC, and it's just a scary fact.
My question is, why is it males? Why not females? I mean, why is it the males that are more dominant to the drug use, or is it killing males more than it's killing women? Is it a bravado thing? Are they injecting more?
I think, it's a good question. And I haven't read the whole article in great detail, and it may just have been a prioritized anecdotal study that created that outcome from the information they gathered. But, I think when you think about it, for example, 70% of the people incarcerated are male. I don't know if that has anything to do with this, but are there more men using drugs than women? I would tend to say yes, but I don't really know exactly. And I'm sure there's studies around it because it's usually done by gender, also demographics and ethnicity. The local studies are done that way. So the information, I'm sure, is out there, and maybe we'll get Chris to go do some homework and come back to us with some answers in a couple.
He says he did say already he thinks it's adults 18 to 45, rather than just male. But regardless, I think it's do you know if are women more apt to get help from drug addiction than men?
Well, I think women, first of all, in many cases, they're mothers, so they have children, and clearly because they have the children. And I think there's just a level of responsibility, maybe, or there's still some connectivity to the family, the mom's mom or the grandma or the aunt, where the guys that kind of get in trouble with, substance use disorders and go act out tend to kind of disenfranchise themselves from the family. And I think that may be something that doesn't always happen with women, but it certainly does in homes where there's domestic violence or child abuse. But generally speaking, I think women, and I did it in my program for 18 years. Women were more successful. They got better jobs. They stayed in their jobs. And because they had children that they were responsible for, I think they took a different level of connectivity to recovery than a lot of the men do.
Right. Yeah. And it's probably
and that's more anecdotal, I think, than it is factual. But I think it kind of, if you look at across the board, who gets arrested, who's committing the crimes, it's usually male based. And I don't know why that is, but it is what it is.
Because I do see a lot of I don't want to be wrong. Well, it is just more of an opinion maybe than a fact or anything. But in my life, I've seen a lot of girls that have gone down a bad path, but yet their father never stops trying. The father never stops trying. But when it's the son that goes down a bad path, the father will just separate from it and let him go and solve his problems. Yep. But they never stop fighting for their daughters. I understand it as a father to daughters. And I have a son also, but I don't understand it from that point, because I think I would fight the same for both my children, for all my children. But for some reason, I think it's the opposite in the other direction. I think mothers tend to hold on to those addictive sons, but yet the daughters, they become strained. So
Yep. Well, I think maybe it'd be something we focus on, Q1 of next year to get some more information on the, the human side of it and the gender side of it, maybe even ethnicity, and I think we've talked to a few people this last year about it and find out, is there a trend? But I'll tell you, whatever the trend has been, in my opinion, because of COVID and quarantining, there's been some major shifts. I don't think we're going to see what that data looks like probably until 2025. It'll take a couple years, but
yeah, because people don't have time to do the data like they did either. And there's so many numbers.
Right.
I'm sure there's not as many. There's your dog.
Yep.
Trying to get you, trying to talk to you.
No,
so,
it could be UPS at the door. Yeah, my ring's going off too. So UPS is probably here with something that somebody ordered.
Well, yeah. Why are you a shopper, Scott? Do you like shopping?
I can be. Yeah, I'm a bit of a shopper.
I heard the thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Have a good holiday.
Where's my tip? Are you a good tipper, Scott?
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
Going on that.
I think it's especially in today's world. I gave a little envelope to the trash guy the other day. It was really, he was kind of like almost teary eyed when I went out after he pulled up my can up at the top of his truck. And we give that to our people we work with, and I took care of everybody at work and as best I could, and just touching people that way, I think, is a way of saying thank you and I appreciate what you do.
Now, not knowing what it's like to live in big city life like you do, with a large city like San Diego, do you have a dump? Do you have a place where you could just go and, or is it all controlled where they have to come pick it up?
Oh, they pick it up, but we do have dumps. Yeah, you can take stuff to the dump. Just got to drive in and pay your dump fee and empty out whatever you've got. And I think they like it when you sort it now because of all the sensitivity to the carbon footprint and the environment and recycling. California's been into recycling and upcycling for decades now. So we're probably more sensitive than some states, but of course we have a ton, forgive the pun, of trash that's got to be disposed of. So yeah, we have a couple dumps.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to mention to you was, because we often talk about the difficulty of men coming out and saying they need help and all this stuff. So Ben Affleck, who caught a lot of flack for this, and I'm talking about this because I've got a point to it. He was on Howard Stern, which I deemed a top 5 interview because they went into his addiction and his drug use and alcoholism and all that stuff. Now, he did say things that would probably not make you comfortable. He made comments about his ex-wife, Jennifer Garner, perhaps that if he was still married to her, he'd still be an alcoholic, but you got to remember, these aren't rehearsed, similar to what me and you do. These are just questions being asked to him and he answers them. But people gave him a hard time. And I went the opposite route, saying this is his truth, whether or not we like it or not. He's telling his truth. And that's what we're stigmatizing him from telling the truth. Now he's not going to want to talk about this. And it's important for we talk about it all the time. If these famous people could open up and talk about their addiction issues, just to show people
what was the point that he was making, that she was a big drinker and then
that he was miserable in his marriage, and that he thought the best way to solve that was to drink a bottle of gin and fall asleep on the couch. And obviously that wasn't the solution. And then he just, sometimes it's being on Howard Stern. Howard Stern's a great interviewer because what he does is he makes you forget you're talking to millions of people. You feel like you're just talking to him.
Right.
It's what I do to you. You get comfort zone and we're like, yeah, how are you? Great. But he was so honest. And even though it wasn't all stuff you would agree with, it was still honest. And that's what I think we need more of, is these guys just telling their truth, whether we like it or not.
So what was the feedback that he was getting that was causing some?
Well, I guess first of all, I guess Jennifer Garner wasn't happy with it because the one thing, and I'll agree with her on this, is they do have a 16-year-old child and a 12-year-old child and a 9-year-old child who very easily could listen to this. And that's kind of talking bad about your mother. He kind of, it was taken out of context, of course, because that's what TMZ does in the news to get the headline. But if you listen to the whole thing, it was just a blurb, but that's what they grabbed onto. But he did make interesting, like he said, he used to not understand. He would be going to a meeting and there'd be guys there that were there, they're 5 years sober, 10 years sober, and they're at these meetings and they'd talk about how happy they are and stuff like that. And he would get mad. He said, "What are you happy for? You're happy that you ruined your life. You're happy that you and stuff." His theory was, "Why are you here? If you're already sober, why are you here? Get out and let me take care of my problems." It was a selfish. Now he realizes that more of an age after being involved with AA and stuff for all these years. Well, may not have been AA, but some kind of organization. But the whole thing was just very honest in talking about what it's like, that it's no easier for him than for the next alcoholic or drug addict. There's no easy path for anybody that's addicted. And he was very clear that addiction is not just alcohol and drugs. That's what we like to advertise. But there's people eating themselves to death too, and having sex and porn addictions and all these other addictions that are killing people. But I don't know, I've just found it very candid. It was very honest, open, and that's what I appreciated. And he got hammered for it. And he actually had to, when he was on Jimmy Fallon the next night, he did talk about how he had to apologize for misspeaking, but that even his ex-wife being mad at him was overblown by the news.
Well, look at Demi Lovato. Remember California sober. Now it's just sober. So part of the whole thing with addiction is it's a disease of the inability to feel feelings and a disease of denial. So when you get into recovery, you kind of have to learn how to feel again or how to process feelings. And there are people who, I've heard people for years that there are some people that say that half the people that go to meetings want to be there to listen to how miserable everybody else is so they can feel better about themselves. It's also a very selfish disease because most people, when you think about it, I mean, who in their right mind would anesthetize themselves or self-medicate on a daily basis to get blind drunk, or as an example, and not want to feel their feelings and potentially try, end up potentially killing themselves? I mean, it's not like diabetes, but it's a disease like diabetes that if it goes untreated, you're going to die. Yeah. And, obviously people that are that high profile, that are in the public, venue all the time, sometimes they feel like they have to speak up and tell their truth. But I don't disagree with you. I think
now whether or not you agree with him on this, but he says the only way you can become sober, and it's not AA, it's not stopping cold turkey, it's not a magic pill. He says it's suffering. You have to suffer just enough to reach that rock bottom to say no more. And for him, it was watching his children suffer for his weakness. And that's what turned him around. And he said he's never even had a day where he wanted a drink because of he suffered enough.
Yeah. Well, and, look, I'm a treatment provider. I run a treatment center. I'm not the clinician or the psychologist or psychiatrist. And I've learned that one size doesn't fit all, meaning if that worked for him, more power to him. And, the studies all show there's like a 5% success rate, but also there are studies out there that show that 5% of the people who are successful don't do anything other than just stop. And there are people that can do that. There aren't many, and it does happen. But also, the average person who comes in for treatment may have different underlying issues, in my opinion, that go untreated, that will contribute to that perpetuation of the addiction and the disease and the desire to self, anesthetize. So
yeah, it comes from so many angles.
Alcohol, food, internet, gambling, the addiction disease, in order to truly be treated, it's not a matter of just stopping the action of what you're doing to self-medicate. It's also learning how to feel again. It's also learning how to process. It's also dealing with the untreated trauma, the underlying mental health issues, because that's really where the work starts. I mean, the term I like is learning how to live life on life's terms, where a lot of people, will be abstinent, and they'll just, they won't sleep well. They're angry all the time. They're depressed, and they're not processing their own feelings, because you can't do it on your own if you don't have the tools. It's kind of like learning how to be a triathlete on your own without certain skills and coaching and experts, showing you how. You could probably do it over a period of time, but it's like you do something wrong and you keep doing it over and over again, and you're trying to make a change. It generally doesn't work. You have to have the path. You have to understand.
Exactly. If you handed me the pole for pole vaulting and said, okay, go, I don't think I'd do very well.
Yeah, but you could put the pole in your hand, you could put on the tight shorts, and you could run down the ramp, and you could maybe get the pole in that little hole to place it.
I doubt it.
You could do all that, but the odds are you'd probably hurt yourself trying without some basic skill set. That's a good example. It's just like dieting. Dieting works for reducing weight, but maintaining weight loss, that's a whole nother skill set. Takes a lot of changes, and it usually requires someone to help you understand. Because if you're already at that point, your skill sets are gone. They're hampered, or they're infected, or they don't work, or you don't know how to put them together. It just, look, that's why school is so important, because the way people learn, even though some learn differently others, there's a path to it. And it takes time to do that. Just learning to drive, riding a bike, it takes practice.
Yeah, the repeat of things there is a reason why they teach you 2 + 2 for 4 grades, and you learn it because it is a repetitive thing.
Yep. And my mother used to say repetition is the mother of education. So I certainly believe that.
Yeah. What was she? So speaking of, so your mother, was she a educated woman?
Yes, she was an educated woman. She was an English teacher, and she was pretty worldly and very passionate, very community based, and always, she used to refer clients to me all the time, because she was the mom that other mothers called and said, we understand your son, what do you think? And she'd say, well, call him. So she was always, both her and my dad were very community based. They sat on boards. They always did volunteer work, and they always did whatever they could to help us as a family. They were working all the time. So I had these abandonment issues, because they weren't necessarily at home as much as I may have needed. But at the end of the day, they were great providers, and they gave us the tools we needed. We may have lost them, sold them. They may have gotten rusty. But at the end of the day, I was pretty pleased looking back. And I know people who have suffered some catastrophic events in some of these families I work with. It's like they just can't believe what's going on with their kids, but it goes on and on and on and on. And part of it is because the kid hasn't got the new tools yet.
What would she say if we told her you wrote 2 books? Would your mother be surprised?
Well, she saw my first book,
Oh, she did.
Both my parents are in heaven playing bridge now. My dad doesn't like bridge, but he'll sit there and play with her.
Yeah.
But they would be very excited. I mean, my mom would be one of our regular guests. She'd tell us what we need to focus on, and she'd make sure that, you sat up straight and you did what you're supposed to do in front of others. She was proper that way, old school. And,
so your version of heaven has your father still doing what your mother wants to do.
Oh no, there's no doubt in my mind, and it's interesting because my parents got married on Christmas Day, and they did that because that's when the store was closed, when they were in business. They wanted to pick a day where they wouldn't interfere with, the customers not getting served. So Christmas is always an interesting time for me, because that's when my folks had their wedding anniversary. So, so Christmas for me is different than most people. I don't celebrate, but it's a time that I think about them and reflect on them a lot. So it's always nice to, and I had great times with my parents when I got older. As a kid, I was a troublemaker. I was a knucklehead, and I caused them a lot of stress, but we became very good friends, their last 15, 20 years on the planet. So I was pleased.
That's good. You're lucky.
Yeah, I am.
That gives you some luck. I wonder how often that is, seeing that December 25th is not a Jewish holiday. I wonder how many people do get married in the Jewish faith on Christmas Day.
It's kind of unusual, I think, just because it's, most everything's closed, so it is unusual. I think I know they picked the day. They told me the story. They picked the day because that's when the store was closed and they wouldn't have to worry. I think that's the story they tell, and they always repeated it whenever asked. So it was always interesting. But celebrating their anniversary during the holiday season was interesting because in retail, the month of December is your biggest month of the year for business. So it was always an interesting dichotomy to have that one thing happening at the same time during the month of the holidays.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like learning about other people's family dynamics and stuff.
Yeah,
and
family dynamics.
it's just interesting to hear because I'm always I get a little jealous when people say things like, they were able to talk with their mom because I never, my mother was 64 when she died. And even though she was sick, you just don't feel like today's the last day. You got plenty of time. You always got plenty of time till you got no time. So that's the lesson. Talk to your mother if you can. That's the lesson.
Talk to any of your family if you can, while you can, because when they're gone, they're gone.
Yes, they are. But okay, so I think that's going to be it I think that'll be it for 2021. Seeing that next week is bringing us towards the new year, we'll take next week off because we're planning on coming back and doing some bigger things, getting some bigger guests, and just continue to build. But we need your help out there. So if you could share us and mention us, keep us on your mind, visit our YouTube page, make sure you're following it, visit our Facebook page and follow it, and just continue. But I wish everybody a happy holiday. I wish everybody a happy new year. Stay safe. Stay sober if you are choosing that path. Use Uber if you're not choosing that path, and just be the best version of yourself.
Yep. Happy holidays to everybody. And don't forget to give me a call. I'll be around 619-993-2738. Call or text me anytime. Let's talk. And this can be a tough time for anybody and everybody during the holidays. So don't be shy. Ask for help. There is hope and there is help.
Yep. And our sign off is, if no one's told you they love you today, we love you. And that's going to be it for Ending the Stigma. I wish your daughter good luck and your wife on her flight out unless they're driving. You should have made them drive, Scott. Would that be fun?
No, and actually her older sister's going. So the girls are all going to New York. And they asked me a dozen times, and I've watched them bicker and fight about getting ready for the trip. I'm pretty happy I'm not going.
So
I will just get in the way.
Let me get you in a little trouble while I can. If they were driving and it was your car, who would you prefer to drive?
My oldest. She's a great driver, good navigator, pays attention. My wife really doesn't like to, and my youngest gets distracted. So,
well, that's good because your youngest now could get used to the subway system.
Yep.
And she does no longer have to worry about owning a car.
That's correct. As a matter of fact, her lease, she turned over to her sister, which worked out really well timing wise because her sister's lease was up. So she gets her sister's car. Timing was good for that.
Perfect. Well, good luck to her. Good luck to you. Enjoy.
All right, brother. You too.
And I'll talk to you soon. This is Ending the Stigma, available at Apple and Spotify. So you can go listen to the audio parts there. More are going up this week. And that's it. So I'll see you later, Scott.
Take care, brother.